Hello, Michael Kelly here. And I want to talk to you today about why did I write Rampant Damsels? And this is a question which has been often asked by people who've read it. Why would anybody write anything like that? And I'm going to have to answer this coming from several different angles. Firstly, the origins of the book. Many years before it was published, and I mean best part of 20 years before it was published, in the days before the internet, I used to operate a play-by-mail role-playing game, which was called Lurkins and Durkins. And it was kind of unique in that it was quite deliberately a comedy role-playing game. It was done for laughs. And there were a lot of laughs. It had larger-than-life characters in bizarre situations in a very peculiar world. And many of the core concepts, settings, and non-player characters from that role-playing world were carried forward into Rampant Damsels. It's their story. And there are 10 chapters in the book. And really each one, as well as being part of the overarching narrative, each one also stands more or less alone. It can be read as a sort of short story in its own right that contributes to the overall arc of the book. And many of these scenarios come from adventures which took part in that game. The Dungeon of Gutbuster Groaning Bollocks, for instance. The idea of the Cudgel of the Gods. The whole idea of the Rampant Damsel Tavern and the ladies who ran it. These were all lifted directly from the old play-by-mail role-playing game. Because I enjoyed it so much, and I mean, so many hundreds upon hundreds of pages of creative output, most of which were only ever read by two people, myself and the person on the other end of that particular mailing. So that's where the idea came from. What about the themes? Well, in my working life, before I became nefarious things such as an author and a magician and so on. But when I was doing a regular job, in each job that I've done, I've tended to work in places which have a mostly female staff. And one of the most shocking things for a man in that sort of situation, once you become integrated and they kind of forget you're there in your little corner, you get to overhear the conversations that women have among themselves. And of course, these are the conversations they would never want any man to hear, just as a group of men would never want a woman to overhear the conversations that they have when they're together. And I realized that women are every bit as dirty-minded as men are. They love dirty jokes and things, but they love it on their own terms. You know, they don't necessarily want men to be coming and making dirty jokes and observations to them, but they love these things on their own terms. And of course, the funniest jokes are dirty jokes. Everybody knows this. We all pretend we don't laugh at them, but we do. You don't have to pretend, because there's only yourself listening to this. So you can be honest with yourself. We all like a good dirty joke. And sex is funny. At least to me it is. I think it's one of the most ridiculous things that people get so obsessed about. You know, all of this messing about with oddly shaped pieces of flesh, and obsessed is the word. So I just think that the whole thing, once you step back and take a look at it, it's just ripe for ridicule. And we're laughing at ourselves, all of us. You know, you're not pointing at somebody else and laughing, because it's something that, you know, it does affect us all. And if we can all laugh about these things, it's far healthier than the alternative, isn't it? So I wanted to kind of reflect that. I wanted to write a fantasy novel where the main characters were women, and they were larger than life, bold as brass women. They weren't just men in dresses. You know, a lot of people get this idea that a strong woman is just a woman behaving like a man. They're not. They're being themselves. And having been in these situations and being able to observe them kind of as the odd one out, I am really aware that, you know, that there is this really comical, rich depth to female dirty humor, and female strength. And I wanted to write about that because I'd spent so many years observing it, laughing about it. And when I was drawn into the circle, laughing with them, you know, it was just so rich and so wonderful. So it's over the top. It's really, it's a kind of arse about face Benny Hill type humor. And of course, it's got all the fantasy tropes in there. Because it's a comedy, all of the plot lines and everything are taken much less seriously than you'd expect. Although there are character deaths, you know, and the unexpected does happen sometimes, and the unfortunate. And you have these wonderful female main characters, and I'm probably doing a disservice, but just about every male character in the book is a loser of some description. And it's wonderful to play with those kind of power dynamics in a novel. And I thoroughly enjoyed the process of writing it, which is why I went on to write so many more. A couple of other things before we run out of time, because I am limiting these to about 10 minutes. There is, to pay homage to the role-playing game, there is a chapter in here which is the kind of choose your own adventure type thing. You know, the old, if you do this, turn to such and such a paragraph number. If you do that, turn to such and such paragraph number. It uses dice. It has a combat system. It's like the old fighting fantasy game books, you know. And that went down a storm. And it's something that I modified slightly, but carried over so that each subsequent book in the series also has a chapter which the reader plays through and chooses their own path. And it can be very different each time you try it. The opening chapter is a little bit tamer than the rest of the book. I still hadn't got used to using swear words and naughty things like that at that point. And you can kind of tell it's different. It's a little different in tone. It's a bit lighter. It's a bit sillier. But I wouldn't change it because it does really gently let you into the world. It does introduce the main characters, and I still think it's a pretty good introduction. I've been tempted to go back and rewrite that chapter at times, but I don't think it's a good idea. It is what it is. And then it's followed by chapters 2 and 3, which are two particularly funny and strong chapters. So it's a really good punch when it comes down to it. All of these years later, I'm still really proud of Rampant Damsels. If I sit down and start flicking through its pages, it still makes me laugh out loud. This is the very first edition, by the way. This was published by Blurb. Let's see, there's the logo on the back. blurb, because these were in the days when Amazon self-publishing didn't exist. You had Lulu, who were kind of the pioneers, but I had difficulty logging on to Lulu to begin with, so I published through Blurb, and then the Lulu version followed, and Amazon much later, once they got their act together. And of course, now I should expect they practically dominate the field. But I really do love this Blurb edition. It's 8 by 5 inches rather than 9 by 6, which I really love. It gives it a bigger page count. Blurb produce beautiful books. They really do. It's just unfortunate that you don't make any through sales there, because hardly anybody knows about them. Particularly photo books. If you want to self-publish a photo book, Blurb is the place to go for sheer quality. You know, they are streets ahead of Lulu and Amazon in terms of quality photo books. But Rampant Damsels, yeah, it's funny. Go read it. You'll enjoy it. Honest. Even if you don't admit it.